All right, so this is a solution of 5-59. In this problem, we are asked to make a sketch of the graph of this function and then answer some questions about it. So the first thing I would do is I would ignore some of the transformation parts of it and think about what does y equals 2 to the x look like. And if we were to just sketch a graph of that, it would look something like this. So that's an exponential graph, roughly y equals 2 to the x. Now, if we take a look at what's happening here, this y plus 3, we need to subtract 3 from both sides to get it into y equals form. Which means we're going to take this entire graph and shift it down 3 spaces. And so your new asymptote is going to be down here at y equals -3. Your original asymptote was at y equals 0, because that equation could never get to 0. And then it's going to cruise through this point and then go shooting up. Yeah, so that's what the sketch of that graph would look like. The first question, part A, asks what are the domain and range of this function? Remember that domain is all of the possible x values you can plug into the equation and have it work, where you'll get outputs. And there's no restriction to the left, there's no restriction to the right on the domain. So the domain is all real numbers. The range is the restrictions on the outputs. What are the possible outputs you can get from this equation? Now, going upwards, there's no limit on y going in the upwards direction towards positive infinity. There is, however, a limit, an asymptote at y equals -3. So your range is going to be y has to be greater than -3. Not equal to, because it'll never actually hit that asymptote. Part B then asks, does this function have a line of symmetry? So line of symmetry would be a line of reflection. And an exponential graph is not going to have a line of symmetry because this upper part doesn't head towards an asymptote. There's no x or domain restriction. So there's no symmetry on this graph like there was on a parabola. C, so no. C is what are the x and y intercepts? Well, the y-intercept is going to be this point right here. So the y-intercept is at 0, -3. The x-intercept is going to be when y equals 0. So at what point does y equal 0? And so what we're looking for is that point right there. What is its x-coordinate? And you can think about this as 0 equals 2 to the x minus 3. Add 3 to both sides. 3 equals 2 to the x. Well, now how do we figure out what x is? And this is what we've been working on recently. In terms of, I think when we're doing chapter 5, oh no, we had logarithms in chapter 5, so we might have been able to do this at this point. But I know for sure now that we're in chapter 7, we can do this. So at this point, you might have just done a guess and check for x. The other thing, yeah, I think that's the easiest way to do it. Just guess and check that. I'll show the solution now that we know more about logarithms. You take the logarithm, I'm going to do common logs, it's the easiest one for me to work with. So log base 10 of both sides. So then log of 3 using the power property. I bring the x out in front. Divide by log 2. So x equals log 3 divided by log 2. If we pop that into our calculator, log of 3 divided by log of 2. Right. You get it's approximately 1.585. Yeah. So that would be what your x-intercept would be. It's approximately there. D asks you to write the inverse, or actually to sketch the inverse. You don't have to write the equation for it, but sketch the inverse, state what the domain, range, and x-intercepts are. Now, the inverse, try to find a different color here. Oop, there we go. The inverse is the reflection over the line y equals x. Another way of thinking about it is every x and y coordinate, or every point, changes its x and y coordinate. So your x-intercept now becomes your y-intercept. Your y-intercept now becomes your x-intercept. 2, so about right there. And so your graph is going to look like this with an asymptote right here. So your asymptote is now going to be at x equals -3. This is for part D. That's the sketch of the, so this is your f number -1 of x, your inverse. And then your domain and range, since x and y's switch, domain was x, range was y, but now they are switching, so x greater than -3, range is all real numbers. Okay. And then your y-intercept is now at 0, 1.585, and your x-intercept is at, oops, that was -2 over there, sorry. You know what? No, that's right. So that should be -2, so this is, yep. Got my asymptotes right, I just didn't get my y-intercept in the original right. Okay, so that is how we tackle number 59.